presentation. My name is Dan Boulos. I'm an assistant professor at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And for about 10 or 11 years, I was teaching in the digital media program at the Leeward Community College, which is right next to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on the island of Oahu. And I did this instructional design project when I was a master's student in the educational technology program as a way to develop something that would engage learners in the digital media classes that I was teaching. Just a little bit of my background. Before I was teaching in Hawaii, I was an animator. I had my start at Disney Studios on films like Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid, and worked for DreamWorks and Warner Brothers. And I'd always been teaching on the side at CalArts at night in their animation program. Oh yeah, come on in and hi. 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 Welcome.
Sorry.
Oh, no. That's okay, no.
Dan,
yes.
Can we pause for a bit?
Okay.
Okay, so at least we will give them time to
Sure.
So, and then for
can drive themselves through this module to learn some of these things that would have been otherwise done in a lecture sort of format. And then to help maintain their interest through different types of content, from audio, visuals, moving images, interactivity a little bit with buttons. I'm not a programmer, so I didn't get heavily into that side of it. And then being able to segment the information in the module so that they sort of could take it in bite-sized chunks. And that's what led me to the project. So in this particular module, in that class we would cover 7 animation principles. The module only covers the first 3, which are what animators refer to as arcs, timing, and then squash and stretch, which are principles that they have to learn at the beginning. And of those, the arcs one is probably the simplest. It just had a basic concept that, you know, the learning outcome was natural movement occurs along curved paths of action. The timing one was a little trickier because there were 3 different competencies that we were trying to drive home. And then squash and stretch, once again, had 3 of those as well. So in the project, the results from it, were tested for 16 objectives. 9 of them showed improvement. And so it was only a group of 15. One of the sample had to be excluded because they had not completed the post-test properly. So it was a small group test, and but from that, 71% improved their scores on the post-test, and 9 of the 16 objectives showed improvement. After we tested it, the weakest section was probably the trickiest one, which was this idea of teaching animation timing. And one of the comments that is, you know, being sort of processed is that it might be better to have an actual computer-based test rather than we used a paper-based test. So just like in the module, you'll see some of the elements are presented more efficiently because you're on a multimedia platform. The test was a little bit backwards. It was still paper-based, and it's probably what contributed to some of that. But the construction of this module, I divided into 5 sections. There's an introduction, and then we have each of the 3 animation points, arcs, timing, and squash and stretch, and then there's a review section at the very end of the module. And it was just all done on an Apple MacBook laptop, and software at that time was CS4 we were running, and CS3 for Photoshop. You can do all the same things now and more with the current CS6 package. The module workshop that I'll be running off of my Mac today will be on CS5. I think you guys all have CS6 on your desktops, but it's okay, it'll work. It pops open, I tried it. So in this module we used text, narration, buttons, sound effects, graphics, and then movie clips that had live action clips of video as well as animated video clips, all trying to work together to engage the students. So this is an example from just probably the simplest aspect, just taking graphics from a sequence. This was from a video sequence that was pulled apart, and then doing some of these diagrammatic things in Photoshop, just using layers and transparency. There's a button in the lower right corner of the page so the students could advance on their own. And as we get into the module, this page you'll see that on this side it's the movie clip playing the animation, and then here's the actual image sequence from the animation as well. And then this was sort of the same type of idea using a live action clip. So here we have an actual video footage, and then we've broken apart a couple of key points from the video and then illustrated over them in Photoshop to give that effect. And then because the Flash interface doesn't allow you to do things like video editing very well, or really working with graphics for creating layers to illustrate diagrams and stuff, really in Photoshop, that's where all the images were prepped to get them sort of Flash compatible and ready for the library. And then the video clips were all trimmed. In this case, just QuickTime Pro, but you could use any video editing tool to trim the clips. So this clip, I think, is, it can run. So just there was a lot more video of the dog running in slow motion, but just trimming it to use that one part. The subcomponents. I don't have an example of the narration clip, but basically just using a USB mic and a laptop to record audio in any form. Flash will take. When I was opening it on this CS5 version, it wasn't running the WAV files, but the one I was using before, it took all three types. I'm sure on the on the PC interface, it'll run the WAV, and likely you'll have trouble with the AIF format. But MP3s, both platforms take, and it's really simple to make audio for those sections. So I was going to actually try running through the module itself.
Welcome to the Animation Flash module. In this module, you will learn the principles of arc, timing, and squash and stretch. These principles help animators over the years make great-looking cartoons. Please read all of the text.
The narration is
ready,
like the clip that I created that goes at the very beginning of each section.
Please stop and do the test questions on the paper in front of you.
I'm sorry I didn't plug it into the audio system, but I think there's a blackboard that we wanted for the online guys. So that would be basically the way they're introduced. They get that opening screen. There's a narration, me talking instead of talking in the classroom. And then when they're ready to start and they've done looking at the first page, they just click that button. And there's a little audio effect associated with it. On this module, it's a little bit annoying, but for the testing purposes, it was good because it allowed the facilitator to track the speed at which they were progressing through the module. It's kind of a clanging sound that didn't hear. So on this one, there's just an array of simple graphics spread out that create the interface. And then on the next page, then they can see those images all put together so that they're moving, to illustrate the idea that, break apart for them that animation is just a bunch of still images. And then they can actually see the drawings as separate graphics as well. And then the idea, too, is to compare like animation that moves a little smoother with animation that has, not as much visual appeal in the way it's moving because it's not using these animation principles. So kind of a non-example. And then it's asked them, well, why do these things look different? And that's what really gets them into the module. So, and it's all done with sort of like, very casual sorts of dialogue and language, so that it was kind of compatible with the students that I had coming through my classroom, at least at the community college. So when it launches the next section, then you'll have an audio narration introduction as well. So they don't have to listen to me talk too much. That way they can sort of see it and read it. And then there would be a live action example where they can start to try and find those curved paths. And I'll isolate like a clip that I think is a little easier to see it. But the idea too was, for the module to have this stuff where it's, these are things from life. It's just observation, and then we apply it to artificial movement. So, and then giving them control by inserting a play button so that they can run through the clip, so they can read that, and then when they're ready, they can press that button, and it shows them the movement, and then it shows them a visual of that. And basically, that was, I think, in the video clips on that, I had to go into After Effects, and it was just a simple mask, animating a mask revealing a transparent curved line that was a graphic from Photoshop to show the arc. There wasn't anything too complicated in that one. And then just a non-example that they can control too, so that they can see when you don't have arcing movement, you know, things look kind of weird. And that way, if they want to review it, they can keep clicking on it. And then another example that's like a good example, this is from a scene of rough animation from the first Rescuers film at Disney. And then you can give them a little more text, but break it into 2 pieces so they're not reading a big page. So here it's asking them, okay, you look at that clip and identify where you think those arcs are. And then when they click the next button, it gives them a reveal on a graphic that mapped out. And that was just a frame pulled out of the video segment that was prepped in Photoshop to show that. And then this would be the point at which they did do an embedded test when we were testing the module, so they could stop at that point and answer a couple of paper-based questions.
Timing is crucial in animation.
The next section, so there was the narration at the beginning.
As well as character emotions such as joy, happiness, and sadness.
So it introduces them to the 2 main ideas that we want to do. And then in this section, once again, we're showing that the image sequence is what creates the illusion of movement, and showing them that you can do it with drawings or 3D graphics. But there's a nice way to like get a lot of this stuff side by side, that in the lecture normally you had to pull up one thing or show a clip here, then go show a clip there. Meanwhile, they would be doing emails or whatever on their computers, and this way it was all, you know, in one place at one time. So at 24 frames a second was just something I kept as a separate graphic because it was an important concept. And then it puts the drawings aside the movie clip. It's actually animating, going back to that idea of how it falls into the overall list. And then just seeing the speed, so it's telling them, you know, at 24 frames a second when they're far apart, they look like that. And then they see an example of when it's, the spacing is a lot closer together. So it's not that we have to teach everyone here animation today, but because we're running through the module, I guess you're going to get a bit of it. But it was able, you know, it was nice because I could put like examples side by side as well to really make it clear. And that's something that in a lecture, even if you're calling up video clips, it's always separate. And it was just an advantage of having it presented this way. The other concept that is probably more advanced, it was harder for them, I think, is just the idea, how does timing relate to, you know, emotional state of characters? Because they're trying to create characters, and in character acting, you know, the speed at which we move our bodies and these types of animation things. But it was nice because I could retime the same clip 2 different ways, put them side by side, and then have the idea presented there, and they could read it at their own pace. And then once again, breaking down existing, in this case 3D animation, into just the image sequence and relating that to how far you move something. And then it asks them, okay, you decide, is this a character kind of a happy guy or a sad guy based on the way they're moving? And then if they clicked sad, they'd get like a wrong answer sort of thing. If they click happy, they'd say yes, that's based on the speed of his movement. And then on the next page, it would kind of show the key points that it's moving really far in just a few images. So, you know, once again, being able to separate those images from the graphic. This allowed them to try another question, saying, well, if the director wanted you to have a scene where the character looked, you know, more sad rather than happy, you know, which of these 2 would be the correct choice? This one's moving slower, and that's the idea that in the slow one, it's not going to be as... And so on this one, they don't advance forward. They can just click on one. It'll say, no, that one's kind of quick and upbeat, and this one's slower. And this is the type of thing that if the module had more time for development, we could prepare proper animations rather than retiming them. And then they had a chance to be invited to
shape change.
This went on to that 3rd section of shape change, and then having, once again, video clips alongside of pulled frames that show the actual important parts or rather than trying to pause on a video in the classroom. And I thought that was, one of the advantages of this type of presentation. Then having side-by-side clips, they can see more than one example and contrast them when they're thinking about that topic. And then this gave them the video clip, and the next frame gave them the breakdown. Because these are the types of things they'd have to later go on and recreate in their animation to create natural movement. So illustrations. On this one, there was a little bit of a game I played with them, so they can click anywhere on the image and find out, well, where would you put the squash if you were adding shape change in this animation sequence, which was something they'd learned about in class, the bouncing ball. And if they click over the right part, which is down here, then it gives them the correct, that's the ball squashing as it impacts the ground. So this is just really a rollover effect and a button effect in Flash, but by using it that way, they can interact with the image. And it's not hard to create. So this would play the clip of an animation, and then they're supposed to sort of analyze it, and then when they click the next one, there's a couple of pulled keyframes from that highlight the thing. So it's a way to break up stuff and make it very clear visually, as well as keep it flowing. In the lecture, it tends to drag out. And then it asks, again, with the interior shapes, which was one of the more advanced shape change ideas they had to get. And then they'd see a clip again. One more time, they can say, where's the shape change happening? And when they advance, then the highlighted areas of the image would show them that thing. And then they get a non-example. So they say, this is bad animation. If you were going to put shape change in there to make it look better, where would it go? And then so that they can develop some of their critical thinking. And then when they click on it, it basically gives them that diagram side by side with the bad animation, so that they can see, if you were animating that, where would you make some of these corrections? So, and then they had the embedded question.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of this module. Complete this quickly.
So then there was a review section at the end that reminded them how these fit into the overall principles they were learning. And then it gave them images back from the sections they had covered so that they could be reminded of all this stuff with timing and a little bit different layout so it's not boring. And then, so it can make something that looks bad look like something that moves really well. This is a rough animation test from Jungle Book. But just to get them starting to analyze, well, why do some things look bad? And then at the end, they would be able to do the post-test if they were ready, and then these buttons here would take them back to any of the sections of the module, so if they wanted to review any section before they finished. The only thing was, in this version of the module, it didn't have any of there was no back button. So like once you decide I'm going to go to the timing section, you're going to have to work all the way through to get to the end if you want to finish it. Otherwise, they could just shut it off and go to the paper-based test. And that was the module itself. And let's see, there's my arrows. So just as a review, it was the beginning point was really to identify the key learning outcomes and actually write the assessment items. So coming up with the actual questions that would be on like a pre-test or post-test, or if it was just, if we weren't testing the module, if we were just using, a test in the classroom, then what are those assessment items going to be? From there, I could develop sort of a script for the linear experience of the module. And then from that, I would begin by recording the narration in the script as outlined in whatever I came up with. And then I would have to prepare all the things. So I'd have like, okay, well, here I would need a clip of a live action example of squash and stretch or shape change. So I'd start looking for stuff. And when I find it, then I'd decide, okay, I want to pull out some frames. So that's when I do that sort of work in Photoshop and with the editing tools to prepare everything for the Flash library. And then once that stuff was ready, then we could actually get into Flash, start importing things into the library. And then while in Flash, basically the order was working with the audio first to lay in any narration, because they'll have set lengths to the clip of audio you've created that's going to take up a certain part of your timeline. then to go in and place the visuals. So if you have video clips that are trimmed, those will also sometimes have a length depending on how you're applying them in Flash. So those are things that sort of guide you in building out the actual length of your timeline for the whole module. And then the final thing would be to add buttons that would allow you to navigate through the module. So basically in Flash, if you haven't used it before, through a user interface, you can apply action scripts. You don't actually have to write these codes that allow you to jump from one frame to another in the timeline and stop sounds or start sounds or play a film or stop a film, things like that. So my, my technical side of my knowledge in Flash, I've always been more of a user from the art end of it. So I don't do a lot of programming. Some people have a lot more advanced programming skills. They work with ActionScript a lot, and they can create a lot more interactivity than I did. Mine was pretty basic, and in a way I think it's good because as instructors, if we're creating these tools for ourselves, if there's no one at our institutions that's going to be doing it for us, unless we're actually doing the programming side of it, we'll probably be doing pretty simple stuff. So if anyone here does high-end programming, this will probably be a little rinky-dink as we run through the creation of it. But basically, I wanted to have time to work through a little bit of, like, what if we created a question and had like a right and wrong answer and created a frame advance through our own little Flash timeline and applied at least a video clip or some graphics. So what I did is prepared a library that has a few things in it, and I've installed it on everybody's machine. So there'll be a Flash file that would be opening in a minute or two. And then, is there anyone here that's never used Flash before? The Adobe Flash? Everyone's used it? Okay. So we'll probably skip the Flash interface introduction, or we can go through it very quickly. But basically, I'll just run you through how I put this stuff together, and we can try one. And that'll be about it.